Welcome to MantleSaga, where superhero legends begin. Wolverine was supposed to be stopped before any of this could happen. In this universe, that moment never came. S.H.I.E.L.D. never deprogrammed him, Hydra never lost control of him, and the Hand never stopped feeding him names. By the time the Marvel Universe understood what had gone wrong, the killing had already begun, and the hope of saving Logan was starting to disappear. Spider-Man was dead. Captain America had already been broken in an earlier clash, and somewhere ahead, still unseen but already waiting, stood the final terrible truth of this timeline. Wolverine was no longer a hero trapped inside a mission gone wrong. He had become the perfect living weapon, and every hour he remained active gave Hydra and the Hand more time to turn the Marvel Universe into a graveyard. That possibility had always existed inside Logan, which was why he frightened people even when he stood on their side. Beneath the loyalty, beneath the hard-earned humanity, beneath the rough code that separated him from the monsters he fought, Wolverine had always carried the scars of Weapon X. He was a man built through pain, sharpened by war, conditioned by manipulation, and trained to survive long after ordinary men would have fallen apart. What made him terrifying was never just that he could heal. It was that suffering had taught him how to keep going through almost anything. That is what made the original enemy of the state premise so powerful in the first place. The Hand and Hydra did not need to invent a new monster or grant Logan some impossible power he had never possessed. They only needed to strip away the conscience that gave his violence direction and turn his instincts against the people who trusted him most. Once that happened, Wolverine did not need speeches, hatred, or grand ideology. He only needed orders, targets, and an escape route whenever the walls began closing in. In the original chain of events, there was still a line between the weapon and the man. Logan was eventually captured, his mind restored, and the tragedy stopped before it became absolute. But in this timeline, that rescue never happens. No one reaches him in time, no one pulls him back, and no one interrupts the machinery that keeps aiming him at hero after hero. The difference seems small at first, but it changes the fate of an entire universe. That is why this story does not truly begin with the bunker, or Kitty Pryde, or even the first famous death. It begins with the moment the most relentless survivor in Marvel history is left without mercy, without control, and without anyone capable of saving him from the people using him. From that point forward, the fall of the Marvel Universe is no longer a distant threat. It is only a matter of time before Logan turns from a corrupted hero into the force that tears the whole world apart. The end of the Marvel Universe does not begin with a grand invasion or a cosmic disaster. It begins with a single failure that nobody can undo. In the original timeline, S.H.I.E.L.D. eventually captures Wolverine and breaks the Hand and Hydra's hold over his mind before the damage becomes irreversible. Here, that moment never arrives, and the entire balance of the universe shifts because one man who should have been saved is left active for too long. That change turns a tragic mission into a systematic extermination. Logan is already one of the most dangerous close-range killers in Marvel, but Hydra gives him the one advantage that makes him almost impossible to contain. Whenever a fight starts slipping away from him, whenever a hero gets close to finishing what they started, Hydra simply teleports Wolverine out. That single advantage robs every hero of the one thing they need most, a chance to end the threat before it moves on to the next target. The Hand makes the situation even worse by adding something darker than tactics. Their mysticism gives the whole campaign an unnatural, almost ritual quality, as if Logan is no longer just an assassin being deployed from battlefield to battlefield. He starts to feel like a curse moving through the Marvel Universe, one that cannot be reasoned with and cannot be held in place. Science gives him mobility, but dark magic gives the entire operation a sense of inevitability that makes every death feel like part of a larger collapse. That is why the heroes fail to stabilize the crisis quickly enough. They are not facing a rogue ally who can be restrained, talked down, or rescued in the middle of a fight. They are facing a predator with endless momentum, tactical extraction, and handlers who understand that the fastest way to break the Marvel Universe is to attack the people holding it together. Teams cannot regroup. Rescue attempts turn into traps, and every confrontation becomes another chance for Logan to strike, vanish, and leave the survivors with one more body to bury. As that pattern repeats, the world itself begins to change shape. Familiar names start disappearing from the board. Safe places stop feeling safe, and the idea that this is only a temporary crisis becomes harder to believe. The surviving heroes slowly realize that they are not watching a series of isolated murders. They are watching the exact moment when the Marvel Universe stops functioning like a world protected by heroes and starts becoming a hunting ground built around their fall. The first deaths are what make the nightmare real. Before that, there is still room for denial, still room to believe Logan can be contained, reached, or saved before the damage becomes permanent. But once the bodies start dropping, that illusion dies with them. Wolverine is not lashing out blindly. He is being directed with brutal precision, aimed at heroes in ways that exploit their instincts, their trust, and the hesitation that comes from recognizing a friend just before he kills you. Spider-Man is one of the clearest signs that the universe is already breaking. Peter Parker is fast, brilliant, and almost impossible to catch cleanly when his instincts are firing. But Logan does not fight like the enemies Peter is used to outthinking. He does not waste motion, does not care how much damage he takes getting close, and does not leave emotional room for mercy once he is inside striking distance. Against a hero like Spider-Man, who still thinks in terms of saving lives even while his own is in danger, that difference becomes fatal. Iron Fist falls while protecting the President of the United States, and that detail widens the scale of the catastrophe immediately. This is no longer a crisis unfolding in alleys, hidden compounds, or places the public never sees. Wolverine has become a national-level weapon, something Hydra can point at the highest symbols of order and safety to prove that nowhere is secure anymore. Danny Rand dies the way heroes often do, stepping in front of danger for someone else. But in this timeline, even that nobility becomes just another opening Logan knows how to exploit. Then Luke Cage goes after Wolverine, and Luke dies too. That matters because Luke represents durability, defiance, and the belief that some heroes can absorb enough punishment to hold the line even when everything else is breaking. When someone like that falls, the message spreads far beyond the fight itself. It tells every surviving hero that toughness is not enough, courage is not enough, and even the men who seem unbreakable can still be torn apart when the attack is fast enough, vicious enough, and backed by an enemy determined never to let its weapon lose. The emotional damage of these first killings is even worse than the tactical damage. Wolverine is not just removing heroes from the board. He is corrupting the logic of the Marvel Universe itself, turning trust into weakness and familiarity into a death sentence. Every fallen name leaves behind more than grief. It leaves behind fear, because the people still alive now understand that the deadliest thing about Logan is not simply what he can do to his enemies, but what he can do to the people who once believed they knew him. Once those early names are gone, the survivors are forced to confront a truth that feels even worse than the deaths themselves. This is not a temporary crisis waiting for the right rescue or the right counterattack. It is the opening stage of extermination, and worse still, the hand is about to make sure that death no longer means what the heroes once believed it did. The bodies falling across the Marvel Universe are not the end of the horror. They are only the beginning of something much darker. If Wolverine had only been killing heroes, the Marvel Universe might still have had some hope of recovery. The losses would have been catastrophic, the grief unbearable, but death would at least have remained an ending. Instead, the hand transforms every fallen hero into something even more horrifying. In this timeline, the dead do not stay gone long enough to be mourned with peace. That is where the story becomes truly monstrous. Through dark mysticism, the hand resurrects the heroes Wolverine kills and bends them into service, turning the bodies of legends into weapons for the very forces that destroyed them. It is not enough for Hydra and the Hand to remove the world's protectors. They need those same protectors dragged back into the war, hollowed out, repurposed, and sent against the people who once fought beside them. That changes the emotional logic of the conflict instantly. A dead hero can be remembered with dignity, but a resurrected hero fighting for the enemy becomes a desecration. The survivors are no longer just losing friends and allies. They are being forced to watch those same faces return as instruments of terror, stripped of agency, and used to break the spirits of anyone still resisting. It also destroys the usual superhero rhythm of sacrifice and recovery. In most wars like this, losing a teammate weakens morale and reduces the strength of the defense. Here, every failed stand actively strengthens the enemy. Every act of heroism carries the risk of becoming raw material for the Hand's growing army. and every battle starts feeding the very force the heroes are trying to stop. At the center of that machine is Wolverine. He is still the spearhead, still the one name every surviving hero fears hearing next, but now he becomes something worse than an executioner. He becomes the opening through which the Marvel Universe is transformed into its own undoing. Logan kills them, the Hand reclaims them, Hydra folds them into the campaign, and the cycle keeps expanding until resistance itself begins to feel like a trap. That is the moment the surviving heroes finally understand they cannot keep fighting this war in the open. Strength is no longer enough, and numbers are no longer enough, because every direct confrontation risks feeding the enemy more bodies and more symbols. The Marvel Universe begins to retreat, not because its last defenders have lost their courage, but because they have finally seen the true shape of the collapse. This is no longer a battle to win through force. It is a disaster to survive long enough to stop. By the time the final resistance gathers, it no longer feels like a superhero team assembled for a comeback. It feels like the last survivors standing inside the ruins of something sacred. Captain America, Susan Storm, Magneto, Kitty Pryde, and Nick Fury are not together because momentum is on their side. They are together because too many heroes are already dead, too many others have been turned, and the few still left understand that if this plan fails, there may not be another one. Even Fury's bunker reflects that mood. It is not a shining command center or the kind of rally point where heroes make speeches about hope before charging back into battle. It is a sealed wound beneath a dying world, a place built to buy time in a universe that has almost run out of it. The atmosphere inside is tense, exhausted, and painfully focused, because everyone there knows the same truth. They are not planning victory in any grand sense, only one last attempt to stop the blade before nothing remains. That is why the trap is built with such cold precision. Automated shotgun turrets are positioned outside to force Wolverine into a predictable entry point. Ultra-titanium doors are meant to seal shut behind him. Susan Storm is supposed to contain him inside a force field, and Magneto is meant to disrupt Hydra's teleportation support with an electromagnetic field. Kitty Pryde is the hidden contingency. If everything else fails, the one piece of the plan no one wants to stare at too directly, because saying her role aloud would make the cost feel immediate. Each role fits the person assigned to it in a way that makes the whole scene more tragic. Susan becomes the barrier holding chaos back. Magneto becomes control imposed on violence through sheer will, and Captain America becomes what he has always been, a wounded symbol, still standing even after already losing part of himself in an earlier clash with Wolverine. Kitty, quieter and less imposing than everyone else in the room, becomes the final variable, the hero whose power may matter most precisely because it does not look like the kind of strength people build legends around. The cost of that plan hangs over the room before the battle even begins. Steve Rogers is no longer the untouchable super soldier of wartime myth. He is already maimed and still preparing to face Logan again. Fury speaks like a man who knows he may be sending everyone present to their deaths, and Magneto has lived through enough extinction to recognize the shape of a doomed defense when he sees one. No one needs a speech about sacrifice, because they are already standing inside it. So they wait behind steel, behind strategy, and behind powers that once would have felt more than enough to stop almost anything. Outside that bunker is a world already breaking apart, and somewhere in the dark beyond its walls is a single hunter backed by Hydra and the Hand. The silence inside does not feel like the calm before battle. It feels like the last pause before judgment. The plan does not fail slowly. It fails all at once. In the exact instant the bunker stops behaving like a fortress and starts behaving like a tomb. The proximity alarm sounds, and for one brief moment, everyone inside believes the battle is about to unfold exactly where they prepared for it. The turrets are in place, the doors are ready, and each surviving hero braces for Wolverine to come straight through the entrance and into the trap waiting for him. Then Kitty says she cannot see him. That single detail shatters the illusion of control before anyone even has time to name what it means. A second later, the floor erupts, and Wolverine tears up from below like something dragged out of the underworld itself. He does not charge the bunker like a berserker battering at a wall. He tunnels underneath it, bypasses the obvious path, and destroys the entire logic of Fury's plan in one brutal move. That is what makes the moment so devastating. It is not just that Logan is strong or fast. It is that he is still hunting with terrifying instinct backed by an enemy that understands exactly how heroes think and how traps like this are supposed to work. The bunker was designed to funnel Wolverine into a kill zone, but instead he turns the bunker into one, and the last stand of the Marvel Universe begins with the defenders already losing control of the ground beneath their feet. Susan Storm is hit before the architecture of the plan can fully form around him. She was supposed to be the invisible wall that made the rest of the strategy possible, the barrier that would turn the sealed room into a cage, but Wolverine gets to her first. In another world, one more second might have been enough for her force fields to lock the room down. In this one, Logan steals that second, and with it, he steals the only chance the heroes had to keep the battle on terms they could manage. From that point forward, everyone inside the bunker understands the truth whether they say it or not. They are no longer executing a plan. They are reacting inside the ruins of one, fighting minute by minute in a space that has already been broken open by the very thing it was built to contain. The steel walls are still standing, the doors are still real, and the survivors are still alive. But the structure that held all of it together is gone. Wolverine did not walk into their trap. He broke it from beneath them, forced the last defenders of the Marvel Universe into chaos, and turned their final prepared stand into a panic-stricken struggle for survival. From that moment on, the bunker no longer feels like a place of defense. It feels like the center of the collapse itself, a sealed room under a dying world where the monster has already found his way in. Once Susan Storm goes down, the rest of the plan begins collapsing around her with brutal speed. She was never just another fighter in the room. She was containment, separation, the invisible line between Wolverine and everyone else. The second that line disappears, the bunker stops functioning like a strategy and starts becoming a slaughterhouse. Magneto reacts with the one move only Magneto can make. In the middle of panic, blood, and shattered timing, he seizes the adamantium fused into Wolverine's skeleton and locks Logan in place with raw magnetic force. For one brief moment, it looks as though control might still be possible, as though sheer power and discipline can hold the nightmare still long enough for the others to recover their footing and force the battle back into human terms. But Hydra is still in the fight, and that changes everything. Wolverine vanishes and reappears behind Magneto in an instant, the teleportation support erasing the single restraint powerful enough to truly neutralize him. That is why the heroes have been losing from the beginning. Every time they find an answer, Hydra removes the cost, and every time Logan is cornered, someone reaches in to deny the universe its chance to stop him. Magneto's concentration breaks for only a heartbeat, but against Wolverine, a heartbeat is fatal. Logan strikes with the same brutal efficiency that has carried him through hero after hero, and one of the most powerful mutants alive falls before the room can process the loss. A man who survived persecution, war, and the collapse of nations is reduced in seconds to one more body on the floor, killed not by a greater ideal, but by a weapon that no longer remembers what loyalty ever meant. That leaves only Captain America and Kitty Pryde still standing inside the wreckage of the bunker. The symbolism of that final pairing is impossible to miss. Steve Rogers is the broken remnant of an older, heroic age, a wounded symbol who has already sacrificed pieces of his own body trying to stop Logan once before. Kitty is something quieter, but no less essential, a hero whose power does not rely on force and whose survival now carries the last fragile possibility that Wolverine can still be stopped. But even then, the momentum belongs to Logan. The room is too broken, the defense too shattered, and the losses too immediate for the last two defenders to reclaim control. They are no longer fighting to turn the tide. They are fighting inside the final seconds of a failed last stand, with Steve forced to step forward one more time, and Kitty left staring at the moment where resistance narrows down to sacrifice. Captain America steps forward because someone still has to stand in the way. By this point, the battle is already lost in every conventional sense. The trap has failed, the bunker is collapsing into blood and chaos, and the people who might have stood beside him are already dead. But Steve Rogers has never measured duty by the odds, and even now, broken and outmatched, he moves because Kitty is still behind him, and Wolverine is still coming. There is something almost unbearably cruel in what this moment represents. Wolverine, once a hero whose savagery protected the innocent, now stands as violence stripped of conscience and aimed at everything it once defended. Captain America, once the clearest symbol of order, sacrifice, and moral certainty, has been reduced to his barest essence. Not the shield, not the myth, not even the body that war once perfected, but the will to stand up one more time when every reason to fall has already arrived. Steve fights anyway, and that is what gives the scene its weight. He is wounded, diminished, and fully aware that Logan has already carved through heroes who were stronger, faster, and far less broken than he is now. In another kind of story, this would be the moment where the symbol rallies the fallen and drags hope back into the room. Here, it becomes something sadder and more powerful, proof that heroism is not the promise of victory, but the decision to resist when victory is already gone. Wolverine kills him with horrifying finality, driving his claws into Captain America's skull and ending the life of the man who spent decades standing as the moral spine of the Marvel Universe. It is not simply a death. It feels like an execution carried out against an idea, as if the old heroic promise dies with Steve Rogers in that bunker. The belief that there will always be one last shield, one last line, one last figure standing upright when everything else gives way is torn apart in a single violent instant. And once he falls, the room changes. It feels colder, emptier, and stripped of something larger than life itself. Captain America is gone, and Kitty Pryde is left alone with the monster who killed him, staring at the body of a legend while Logan turns toward her with the same brutal certainty he brought to everyone else. That is the image this moment leaves behind. Not a glorious final stand bathed in triumph, but Captain America dead in a hidden bunker beneath a dying world, his last act reduced to what it always was at heart, buying one more chance for someone else. For one brief moment, Kitty Pryde still looks at Wolverine and sees Logan, not the weapon Hydra aimed at the Marvel Universe, not the butcher who turned heroes into bodies and symbols into ruins, but the man who once fought beside the X-Men and bled for people he cared about. That instinct to reach for the person behind the monster is what makes her hesitation feel so human and so devastating. Even at the end of this nightmare, some part of her still wants to believe there is something left in him worth saving. But this universe has already burned through too much mercy for that hope to survive. In the span of seconds, every death attached to Logan seems to fill the room around her, pressing in until denial becomes impossible. Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Iron Man, Daredevil, Black Panther, Ben Grimm, Captain America. The weight of the dead crushes the last illusion that this can still end any other way. Kitty is forced to confront the truth no one ever wanted to accept. Logan is no longer trapped on the edge of redemption. He has already been pushed past it. That realization does not make the choice easier. It only makes it necessary, and necessity is sometimes the cruelest force in any superhero story. Kitty is not the strongest hero in the Marvel Universe, and that is exactly why this ending belongs to her. Her power was never about domination or spectacle. It was about slipping through what should have held her, surviving what should have crushed her, and moving through danger in ways no one else could. Against Wolverine, that power becomes the last answer left. When Logan comes for her, Kitty does the one thing no one else in that bunker can do. She phases her hand into his skull, bypassing the claws, the adamantium, the healing factor, and the entire monstrous architecture that made him nearly impossible to stop. It is not a flashy victory or a triumphant reversal. It is intimate, brutal, and horrifyingly final, the kind of act that feels less like winning than cutting a poisoned part out of a dying body. Then she solidifies, and the price arrives immediately. Kitty loses her hand in the process, which is what keeps the moment from ever feeling clean or clever. She does not outsmart the story and walk away untouched. She gives up a part of herself to end Wolverine, and in doing so becomes the last hero in this universe forced to pay for Logan's fall in blood. Wolverine dies there in the bunker because even his healing factor cannot fully recover from what Kitty has done. She remains standing only because she was willing to sacrifice the final illusion that Logan could still be saved. That is what makes her act so devastating. She does not defeat a villain in the usual comic book sense. She executes a broken hero after every other option has already been buried with the dead, and the Marvel Universe is saved by the quietest person left in the room. When the killing finally stops, the silence inside the bunker feels unnatural. Wolverine is down, Captain America is dead, and the last stand of the Marvel Universe has ended without anything that resembles triumph. The room feels hollow, as if it understands that something was saved only after almost everything worth saving had already been destroyed. What remains is not relief, but the numb stillness that follows irreversible loss. That is when Nick Fury arrives with Elektra, two of the last survivors left to witness what the battle has cost. With them comes the cold truth behind the bunker strategy. Fury never truly believed steel walls, shotgun turrets, or layered powers would be enough to stop Wolverine on their own. Those measures were never the real solution. They were the narrowing mechanism, the structure designed to strip away every other option until only the one answer Hydra and the Hand could not fully account for remained. That answer was always Kitty Pryde. Fury understood what the others either could not admit or did not want to say aloud. Wolverine could overpower strength, survive punishment, adapt to traps, and escape almost any restraint as long as Hydra remained in play. But Kitty's phasing ability did not meet Logan on his terms. She was the one person in that room whose power could slip past everything that made him nearly impossible to stop, and that made her the hidden center of the entire plan. What makes that revelation so grim is that Fury was not only counting on Kitty's power, he was counting on her pain, on the belief that if Logan crossed one final line, if enough bodies fell, if Captain America died and all hope of saving Wolverine finally disappeared, Kitty would do what the others could not. In another universe, that kind of calculation would feel monstrous. In this one, it feels like the last form of strategy left in a world already stripped of cleaner choices. Elektra's presence sharpens that mood even further. She comes from a world of assassins, resurrection, and moral compromise, a world already closer to the Hand's darkness than most heroes ever wanted to be. Standing beside Fury in the aftermath, she feels like proof that the people left alive are not necessarily the purest or brightest. They are the ones capable of enduring a universe where survival has become entangled with sacrifice, manipulation, and blood. That is the cold meaning of the ending. Wolverine was not stopped by a triumphant final stand in which heroic ideals proved stronger than darkness. He was stopped by a plan built around inevitability, a plan that asked the gentlest person in the room to become the executioner because everyone else had already failed. That is how the Marvel Universe saves itself in this timeline, not by preserving its innocence, but by forcing one last hero to carry the moral wound of doing what innocence alone never could. Wolverine is dead, but the victory means almost nothing because there is almost nothing left to save. That is the bleak truth waiting on the other side of the bunker. The killing has stopped. The living weapon at the center of the catastrophe has finally fallen, and yet the Marvel Universe does not emerge from the nightmare intact. It staggers forward, hollowed out, surviving only in the most technical sense, while everything that once gave it meaning lies broken behind it. Its greatest heroes are gone, and the scale of that absence reshapes the entire world. Some were butchered outright. Others were resurrected and turned into servants of the very forces that destroyed them. Entire teams, symbols, friendships, and legacies have been shattered beyond easy repair, which means that even if the war ended completely in that moment, the universe left standing afterward would no longer resemble the one that existed before Logan was unleashed. That is what makes this story feel so grim, even by comic book standards. The Marvel Universe is not erased in one glorious apocalypse or swallowed whole by some cosmic event that leaves awe in its wake. It is dismantled piece by someone who once belonged to it. Every death cuts deeper because it comes from inside the myth, from a hero whose pain and ferocity once served the very people now lying dead beneath his claws. And at the center of that betrayal is Wolverine himself, or rather, what was made of him. Logan is not remembered here as a mastermind who seized power, or a villain who remade reality in his own image. He's something sadder and more horrifying than that, a broken hero turned into the perfect instrument of collapse, a man whose violence was stripped of conscience and aimed back at the world that once trusted him. In that sense, he becomes the darkest reflection of superhero mythology itself, proof that when a symbol is hollowed out, it can wound far more deeply than any open monster ever could. The survivors are left to endure that truth in whatever form endurance is still possible. Kitty lives, but changed forever by what she had to do. Fury lives, but only because he was willing to turn one final hero into the solution no one else could be. Elektra lives too, though survival in a world this broken feels closer to burden than reward, because none of them are stepping into the beginning of some brighter new age. They are simply the witnesses left standing in the ashes. So the final emotional shape of the story is not triumph. It is aftermath, heavy and permanent, like smoke that never leaves the air. Captain America is dead in a bunker. Kitty Pryde is mutilated by the choice that saved what little remained, and the world beyond them is haunted by empty places where legends used to stand. Wolverine lies still at last, but around him the Marvel universe he helped destroy continues on without its soul, a ruined world with just enough life left in it to feel the loss. As a premise, Wolverine kills the Marvel universe is almost impossible to ignore. It takes one of Marvel's most dangerous heroes, removes the conscience that makes him heroic, and asks what happens when a man built to survive everything is allowed to keep going until an entire world gives way beneath him. On that level alone, the story carries immediate dramatic weight because Wolverine has always existed at the crossroads of pain, violence, loyalty, and barely restrained savagery. That is also why the idea feels larger than the comic's actual execution. The foundation is strong because it grows naturally out of Enemy of the State, uses Hydra and the Hand in ways that make both tactical and thematic sense, and understands that Logan becomes most terrifying when all the worst parts of him are separated from the humanity that usually keeps them pointed in the right direction. The concept promises a tragedy about a hero turned into the perfect weapon against his own world. But the story on the page moves too quickly to fully mine everything hidden inside that concept. The deaths come fast, the devastation is clear, and the central image is memorable, yet much of the emotional and symbolic potential remains compressed into a brutal sketch instead of a fully expanded downfall. The premise promises myth, while the execution often delivers the outline of myth rather than its fullest form. Part of that comes down to timing. The comic arrived during the era of Civil War, when Marvel was already dominated by louder conflicts, bigger ideological fractures, and event storytelling that pulled attention toward more expansive narratives. In that environment, a grim alternate universe one-shot built around a massacre hook was easy to overlook, even with Wolverine at its center. What remained was a story remembered more for its title and its concept than for the richness of its original execution. And yet the aftertaste lingers because the premise strikes at something fundamental in superhero mythology. The most frightening version of a hero is not always the one who turns evil with a speech or a master plan. Sometimes it is the one who is emptied out, weaponized, and left with all the power but none of the soul. Wolverine fits that nightmare perfectly because his violence has always carried moral tension inside it. And once that tension is removed, what remains is not just a killer, but a dark reflection of everything heroic force was ever meant to protect. That is why the final image stays with people. Not Logan standing triumphant over a conquered universe, not a villain celebrating the fall of the heroes, but Wolverine as proof of how fragile trust can be in a world built on icons. A man who once fought beside legends becomes the knife that cuts them down, and when he finally falls, nothing noble rises in his place. Only silence, wreckage, and the grim knowledge that one broken soul was enough to drag an entire heroic age into darkness.